Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one and welcome back to another episode of Mingles with Jingles, this week once again sponsored by NordPass. This time, at least until the end of the month, it's 70% off a 2-year NordPass premium plan with the usual additional 1 extra month for free. As always, completely risk-free with NordPass's 30-day money-back guarantee. Just go to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get this deal, and normally at this point I'd say, and keep those passwords safe and organised. Because, well, yeah, that's what it does, it's a password manager. Except that's not all it does, because it's not just a password manager. I mean, yeah, sure, it will save and encrypt all of your passwords, but it will also save and encrypt any other information that you might find useful to have while you're online. Things like encrypted credit card details, encrypted Wi-Fi passwords. And if you're anything like me and you can't remember your own phone number, actually, why is it funny that because people always laugh when I say I don't know what my own phone number is, but think about it. How many times do you phone yourself? You know what I mean? I mean, that's kind of the whole point of having modern phones in the first place. You don't actually need to remember anybody's phone number, least of all your own, because they're all stored in the phone's memory. In fact, I've had to set myself up as a contact on my own phone so that if I am out and about and somebody needs my phone number, that's the only way I know what it is. But if I'm sitting on my PC and some website's demanding to know what my phone number is, I've got it stored as a secure note on NordPass along with other things like Wi-Fi passwords, because it's not just a password manager. So, 70% off, at least until the end of the month, a 2-year NordPass premium plan with an extra month for free. If you're sitting on the fence about it, just give it a shot. If you're not convinced and you decide it's not for you, there's a completely risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. Just go to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES. And keep those passwords, and a whole bunch of other things besides, safe and organised. So, in other news, it looks like Top Gun Maverick is finally going to make it to the cinemas. And there's a very, very dodgy connection here, because I'm running Aliens Fireteam Elite footage in the background, and the captain of the USCSS Nostromo from the 1979 Alien movie was played by Tom Skerritt, who also played Viper, the instructor and commanding officer of the Fighter Weapons Training School at Miramar in the original 1986 Top Gun movie. I've actually met Tom Skerritt, twice in fact, at various different comic and movie conventions. Although it was a little embarrassing the first time I met him, and through no fault of his own. He's 88 for God's sake. And when he worked on Alien, it was 1979. I mean, it was more than 40 years ago. And he's an actor. He's not a sci-fi nerd. He was there doing a job, playing the role of the captain. He wasn't there to memorise all of the details and trivia in order to impress people with the depth of his movie knowledge 40 years later. So I'm standing there having my picture taken, shaking his hand, and he stopped for a couple of seconds at least to talk to everybody that had their picture taken with him, because he's a nice guy. And he's looking at my hat, and he's got this confused look on his face. And eventually he said, "Are you wearing the wrong hat? Because shouldn't that be the Nostromo?" Because the hat that I'm wearing actually had the crest of the Narcissus on it, which was the Nostromo shuttle. And I wasn't in costume or anything, I was just wearing a alien-inspired baseball cap. So the fact that he recognised that it was alien-inspired, was a plus in his favour. But he didn't know that it was the name of the shuttle on board the ship that he was the captain of. But then again, by the time he'd finished working on Aliens, by the time his character had died and he'd gone back home to America, the shuttle hadn't even been introduced into the movie. It was the last 10 minutes of the film, so there's no real reason why, unless he's a massive science fiction nerd, which he obviously isn't, that he would have known that the name of the shuttle was the Narcissus. So I had this kind of embarrassing moment, like, do I need to explain to him? Because that'll say more about me than it does about him. But yeah, it was fine. So we got sidetracked there, didn't we? We're supposed to be talking about Top Gun Maverick. But you can see the connection. So anyway, yeah, it's finally making it into cinemas. And yet, I'm sure I can remember seeing trailers for it in 2019. That was 3 years ago. But then, of course, the whole COVID-19 thing happened, and they kept threatening to put the movie into cinemas at various points during the course of the last 3 years, and I think they finally decided that, well, cinemas have recovered as much as they're ever going to, and it's about high time they got a return on their investment. Because this was never a movie, unlike certain others that were produced during the pandemic, that was going to come out on streaming. The original Top Gun was one of those movies that defined a generation. And the sequel was never going to come out on streaming. It was always going to be a cinematic release. It will come out on streaming eventually, but it's hitting the cinemas first. Now, I haven't seen it yet, although I do plan on seeing it this week, but the reviews have been exceptionally good. And I think one of the major reasons for the generally very, very good reviews are the way it was filmed. Because whenever you see one of the actors inside the cockpit of a high-performance supersonic jet, it's because they're inside the cockpit of a high-performance supersonic jet. Tom Cruise actually did a lot of his own flying in this movie, in an F-18 Super Hornet. Now, obviously, not everybody that they hired to play aircrew for the movie can fly an F-18 Super Hornet. But there are twin-seater versions of the Super Hornet, the F-A-18F, and they were able to stick the actors playing the pilots and aircrew inside these things, because the one thing that you can't really duplicate on a green screen or inside a studio set is the G-forces that pilots experience when they're undergoing air combat maneuvers. The only way to get that is to actually have the actors do it. So that's what they did. And apparently it looks amazing. The other thing you'll notice about the cockpit of an F-18 Super Hornet is there's not an awful lot of space in there to fit a film crew. So another thing that apparently this was all down to Tom Cruise. For the actors, as well as getting them used to the stress of high-G maneuvers in high-performance combat jets, they also had to teach them about lighting, cinematography and editing, because when they were inside the cockpit, they were pretty much directing themselves. And all of that effort has apparently really, really paid off, because it's a visual experience like, well, I haven't seen it yet, but the trailer looks astonishingly good. I mean, I've been burnt by trailers that looked good before. Yes, Phantom Menace, I am talking about you here. But Rotten Tomatoes has given it 96% positive out of 133 critics' reviews, with an average rating of 8.3 out of 10. They can't all be wrong. At the very least, it's got to be more entertaining than Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which Eddie and I went to see about 2 weeks ago, which was really disappointing. Plus, there's a game tie-in for the new Top Gun movie. I don't know if you must have heard of the Ace Combat series. But while they're hard at work on Ace Combat 8, there's some Top Gun DLC for Ace Combat 7, which I think is coming out on the 26th, so this week. So if you are a fan of the Ace Combat series, and Ace Combat 7 in particular, which, judging on how popular a game series it is, statistically speaking, a lot of you probably are, keep your eye open for that this week. Oh, and incidentally, speaking of May the 26th, Borderlands 3 is currently free of charge on the Epic Games Store until May the 26th. And here's something else that kind of scared me a little bit when it was pointed out to me. Borderlands 3, like Top Gun Maverick was supposed to, came out in 2019. It's a 3-year-old game. But then again, wasn't Borderlands 3 one of those dodgy Epic Games Store exclusives on initial release? Like for the first year or 6 months, if you wanted to play it, you had to buy it through the Epic Games Store. It wasn't available on Steam or anywhere else. That might explain why it feels like a newer game than it actually is, because I refused to get it on the Epic Games Store. I was like, nope, screw that, not going to do it. Actually, I'll be right back. I'll just do a quick bit of research. I'm back, I checked it out. Yep, that was exactly it. It was exclusive to the Epic Games Store for the first 6 months, and apparently Epic paid 2K Games $146 million for the privilege. You can't blame 2K Games. $146 million before they've even sold a copy of the game. Of course they're going to take that deal. But that's what Epic did at first, wasn't it? They just, and again, you can't really blame the developers for this, but they took all of the money that they made from licensing out the Unreal Engine, and all of the money that they made from the Gears of War series, and the money that they continue to make from Fortnite, and they just basically pumped it into the Epic Games Store, securing exclusive publishing rights for all the big new games and some of the smaller new games that were coming out. It's not that they were bullying people into taking the deal. They were just offering developers really, really good money. You know, the kind of money that they were just never going to get anywhere else. So you couldn't quite make your mind up whether they were the good guys or the bad guys. I think I remember hearing that when the Epic versus Apple lawsuit kicked off, Epic disclosed that they hadn't made a profit on the Epic Games Store, and they didn't expect to be making a profit on the Epic Games Store for at least the next 2 years because of the amount of money that they'd spent just establishing its place in the market. Which, when you think about it, makes perfect sense, because if you're trying to make any kind of inroads into the kind of market share that something like Steam has, you've got to spend money. Which is one of the reasons why there's never really been a credible competitor to YouTube. Because if you're serious about trying to set yourself up as a competitor to YouTube, it's going to cost billions with no guarantee of success. And I say that, you know, if there was a credible competitor to YouTube, I would jump ship in a heartbeat, because YouTube is terrible. But would I really? Because YouTube is bad, but it's safe. You know, I have my audience on YouTube. The audience isn't as big as some people think it is. I mean, well, you can tell for yourself. Just look at the number of views that the average video gets. I've got 651,000 subscribers, but my videos don't get 651,000 views. World of Warships usually gets around about 100,000 views after a week. World of Tanks, about 80,000 views after a week. Anything else, a lot less than that. You've got to ask yourself, how many of those, let's say 100,000 dedicated followers, would actually follow you to another platform? Probably a lot less than you think, because this sort of thing has happened in the past. For example, with Twitch. Again, I can't remember the specific details, but a year, possibly 2 years ago, it was either Facebook or YouTube Gaming that was trying to set themselves up as a competitor to Twitch. And they were offering some big money exclusive contracts to fairly prominent Twitch live streamers if they'd jump ship. And several of them took the offer. And they made millions, but they lost all their followers because their followers stayed on Twitch. Now, it's an academic question, because nobody's going to be offering me millions of dollars to leave YouTube and emigrate to, I don't know, Facebook Gaming or whatever. But the fact remains that people tend to be comfortable with what they have, even if they don't particularly like what they have, and they do nothing but bitch and complain about it and wish it was better all the time. This is why, another example, various different media streaming services, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and so on and so on and so on. Do you remember when you first signed up for Amazon Prime? You got all Amazon Prime Video included with your Amazon Prime subscription. And then a couple of years went by, and suddenly all of these add-on channels started appearing on Amazon with stuff that you might like to watch if you were prepared to pay an additional subscription. And then there was the plethora of other streaming services that started popping up, things like Disney+, Hulu, Now TV, AMC, and HBO's own online streaming services. So if you wanted to watch The Mandalorian or The Book of Boba Fett, or I believe also coming out this week, the new Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series, you had no choice. You had to have a Disney Plus subscription. And Disney did kind of shoot themselves in the foot by announcing that The Mandalorian was coming out on, you know, whatever date it was, and it was only showing on Disney Plus. But unless you lived in the USA or Canada, you couldn't even get Disney Plus until 4 months later. All of which meant that The Mandalorian, or at least the first season of it, was the most pirated TV show in history, because, I mean, I would have quite happily paid for a Disney Plus subscription in order to be able to watch The Mandalorian. I tried to pay for a Disney Plus subscription in order to watch The Mandalorian, but Disney just refused to take my money because I live in Britain. So, you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to just avoid going online for 4 months until Disney Plus rolls out in your country in order to avoid spoilers? Yeah, I don't think so. Nice one, Disney. Good job. But then, of course, you know, it's not just limited to Disney Plus. That Tom Hanks World War II convoy escort movie, Greyhound, came out a year or two ago, and I really wanted to see that. But if you didn't have an Apple subscription, you're out of luck. Because of COVID, and this was by no means the only movie that suffered this fate, it didn't even get a cinema release. So if you didn't have an Apple subscription and you weren't going to pirate it, then you couldn't see the movie. So it used to be the case that you would have your TV and maybe a couple of streaming services, Netflix and Amazon Prime being the two big ones, and that would have you covered, that and going to the cinema. But now, in just the space of a couple of short years, in order to be able to see everything that it is you want to see, you need the cinema for those few movies that do actually get a cinematic release, you need your TV, and something like a dozen different streaming service subscriptions just to get the same access to the stuff that you had 3 years ago for a quarter of the price. All of this happening at the same time that the cost of living is skyrocketing, inflation's going up everywhere, interest rates are going up, energy prices have doubled. Is it any wonder that so many people resort to piracy? I mean, I love my new home, okay? I'm not sorry that I bought it. I'm very happy that I've moved in. I love it. But I could have picked a better time. Like I said, energy prices have doubled. And because previously I've always rented, that was always included in the rent. I mean, the rent would go up year on year as things got more expensive. But I lived with Eddie. I always had a good deal when I lived with Eddie. He charged me mates rates rather than the actual market rates for rented accommodation. But now that I'm paying for all of this stuff myself, holy shit, it's expensive. Just the council tax. Council tax is a thing that we have here in the UK. It's a local tax. And the last time I paid council tax was in 2000, 2001, when as a single resident, I lived in a flat above an estate agent's on Gosport High Street. It wasn't a particularly nice neighbourhood. I mean, it was on the high street. So 20 metres away, there was a nightclub. 100 metres further down the road, there was another nightclub and an all-night bar, and it got noisy late at night. Well, it was noisy all night with the music coming out of the nightclubs, and then it was noisy early in the morning after the nightclubs had closed with all the people coming out of the nightclubs and getting into fights on the high street. So, there was that. Despite the fact that to get to my front door, you had to go down a side alley off the high street, but it was still really, really noisy. Now, at the back of the property, there was some waste ground, and it was walled on all four sides. And I don't know how anybody was going to get in there. They would have had to climb over the wall. But it was where the estate agent that I lived above dumped all of their, everything. So I can clearly remember one night. I'll never forget this. I'll never get tired of telling this story either. But I'm lying there in bed, struggling to sleep, when I suddenly noticed this smell. A very fishy smell. A very distinctive smell that once you smell it, you never forget. Jingles, what the hell are you talking about? Look, this is a family show, all right? I can't go into specifics. But if you're old enough, you'll figure it out. So I'm lying there in bed. I mean, things had quietened down now. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. But there was this overwhelming aroma. And I'm thinking, I know that smell. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it. So I got out of bed, and the smell was getting stronger the further towards the back of the property I went to. So you come out of my bedroom, you'd turn left, and then you'd go past the staircase that led downstairs to the estate agents and my front door, and then the bathroom. And then at the back of the property, it was kind of weird because I sort of had a back door in the bathroom that led onto the roof of the back bit of the estate agents, and then this waste ground was in the yard at the back of that. And as I'm getting closer and closer to the waste ground, this overpowering, pungent smell was getting stronger and stronger. And that's when I heard it. A young lady's voice saying, "Oh, Dave. Oh, Dave. Oh, that feels so good, Dave. Oh, yes, Dave." At which point I yelled out, For God's sake, Dave, take us somewhere nice. The smell was coming from between this young lady's legs. That's a horrible story. But anyway, the whole point, council tax. I knew this story had a point somewhere. Was that while I was living at this place, I paid £25 a month council tax. Now, admittedly, this was more than 20 years ago, and the property that I was living in was real bargain basement. But 20 years later, the council tax in this place is 10 times that amount. There ain't nothing getting cheaper these days. So I certainly don't regret moving into this new place. I do love it. It's a fantastic place to live. But I do really kind of wish I'd done it 10 years earlier. That's holy shit. Things are expensive these days. Well, anyway, I guess that's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Oh, this weekend, I'm going to be at London Film and... No, not London Film and Comic Con. That's not until 2 months later. I will be at MCM London Comic Con at the MCM Expo Centre. I'll be going along in my Expanse outfit. I do have a Moff Gideon outfit ready to go, almost ready to go, but I'm saving that for... I mean, the tunic is wool, so it's going to be way too warm to wear that in the summer. If you do spot me, if you're out and about, I'll be there Friday and Saturday, but not Sunday. Feel free to stop me, grab a photo. Look forward to meeting you all there. In the meantime, as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.